10/2/19. There are only two people at the interview. The interviewee, Arthur Neriani, and the interviewer, CCSU student undergraduate Matthew Quapian. Alrighty. Where were you drafted, or did you enlist?
I enlisted in the National Guard, and it was like December 1940, but we were federalized, the National Guard was, and February 7th, 1941. And then we went to the Florida Camp Landing, and we did 2 maneuvers. We did the Louisiana maneuvers and the Carolina maneuvers. And when I came back, the division came back to Camp Landing, I was sent to Officer Candidate School. Now that happened that happened after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I went to, in September of 1941, excuse me, that was September 1942. I went to the Officer Candidate School, Infantry Candidate School in Georgia. And I graduated December 29th, 1942, and was assigned to the 8th Infantry Division in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Alrighty. Where were you living at the time?
In the Army. I mean, my home was always Avon.
Avon, Connecticut.
Always.
Always.
Never changed.
And why did you join?
Why did I join?
Yes.
Because I was listed as number 2 in my draft board, and I made the Hartford Current that morning. And I was getting waves from everybody, being the number 2 man in my draft board, which is draft board 2B from Unionville, Connecticut.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
I didn't. We just found the nearest National Guard unit, and it was Company M of the 169th Infantry, 43rd Division in New Britain.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Of course.
What did it feel like?
It was cold. Well, it didn't bother me too much, because I always obeyed orders from the parents, from playing ball, and in other words, I always did what I was supposed to do.
Tell me a little bit about your boot camp training experiences.
Boot camp. All I know is in Camp Landing, Florida, it was the sandiest place, and in the summer it was the hottest place, and there were times when we had only 1 canteen of water on like a 20-mile march in the summertime. Now that was difficult. Difficult. There were times when people, alongside the roads in Florida, in order to make a road, they dig the side and put it in the center. And that leaves the troughs on the side of the road, they fill up with dirty water. And some of the fellows went in there and drank that water.
Wow.
And fortunately on that particular march, we found an African-American who had some watermelons. And we bought the watermelons. That saved us.
Wow.
It was very, very hot. And we marched with full field pack, carrying all our equipment. And the guys were passing out that couldn't take it. Some, very few.
So it was very difficult.
Yes, it was.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yes, I do. The officers you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Captain Rankin, and I can't get the sergeants were the one that ran the company. Sergeant Baranowski was the first sergeant. He was from New Britain.
And how did you get through it? The entire boot camp training experience?
Well, just do what you have to do. That's it.
Alrighty. On the record, which war did you serve in?
World War II.
Where exactly did you go?
From the United States, we went to Northern Ireland, and we trained in Northern Ireland, and then D+28, we went to Normandy, and we landed at Omaha Beach, and the actual fighting was at La Haye de Puy, which was 10 miles from the beach. And we replaced the 82nd Airborne Division, which had dropped down to Normandy and airborne. They dropped, we relieved them. And then we went all the way we broke out of Normandy and went up the Brittany Peninsula to the city of Brest. And involved in that was the 2nd Infantry Division, 29th Infantry Division. Those two divisions landed on D-Day in Normandy, and the 8th Infantry, which is my division. And after the city of Brest was captured, the reason why we went to Brest was the Army needed a port where they can bring ships and supplies to a port. The other way, it was all being carried in by small boats and these. I'm trying to think of the Boston Red Sox used them on the parade yesterday. They go in the water and they can go on land.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we did. We finished up at the Brest, and then we went all the way to Luxembourg. Well, right through, like we stopped at Reims, France, and then right on to Luxembourg.
Now, do you remember arriving in Ireland and then Normandy, and what was it like?
Well, there was a lot of confusion. I mean, when we landed in Ireland, it was nighttime, and they put us on these little small trains. We didn't know where we were going, and you couldn't put a light on to see anything. And remember, there's a different world when you have no lights. And we finally landed in, the train stopped, and we got off at Omagh in Northern Ireland.
And what was your job, your assignment?
I was a first lieutenant at the time. I was a second lieutenant at the time. And I had in charge of a platoon that defended in case of an attack on the headquarters company. I had 3 anti-tank guns, 57 millimeters, had 3 bazookas, had 3 machine guns, and some of the guys with rifles also.
Did you see combat?
Yes, in Normandy.
In Normandy.
Yeah, got my first prisoner in Normandy.
And were there many casualties in your unit?
No, we were kind of fortunate. They were very, very limited. We were fortunate because I don't know why other headquarters companies took an awful shellacking from different divisions. But we were spared. I don't know why, but I remember one thing in Normandy which should be there, and I would like to express this. In July in 1944, there was a bombing. Our bombers bombed the line in Normandy. And I was about 500 yards from where the bombs were landing. And the thing was that it was July and very dry. And when the bombs were landing, it created a huge dust cloud. And there was a gentle wind from the German side to our side. The bombers that came over last didn't have a target. All they had was the dust. So they bombed in the dust. And that cost us over 1,000 men, lives of 1,000 men, according to what I read recently. And I know it cost 3 anti-tank men from our anti-tank company, and it caused General McNair's death. General McNair was in charge of this whole thing. He was killed that way, and it was all due because of that gentle wind blowing the dust over the battlefield, and the last bombers came over, just bombed in the dust. And it was a huge, huge mistake by our people not knowing that this could happen. Now, you don't see anything on there about how many people were killed, but recently I read that in the Veterans of Foreign Wars newsletter. There was over 1,000. 1,000 of our men were killed.
Tell me about a couple of your other most memorable experiences.
Oh, well, my first prisoner.
Your first prisoner?
Yeah.
Tell us.
My first prisoner, we broke out of Normandy, and the Germans scattered. And I'll never forget, there was a shot, and I could hear the crack of the bullet right near my head. And it was in a hedgerow. Now, we didn't face the hedgerow directly. It was down the length of the hedgerow. I put a sergeant on my left side and a corporal on my right side, and I went down the middle. And fortunately, the German didn't shoot me because he could have killed me very easily. But of course, he would have been shot by my 2 men. So he was smart and didn't shoot me, and I didn't shoot him. He became a prisoner.
And what happened with that prisoner?
Oh, we bring him to the prisoner's cage, and he's in with all the other German prisoners. And he was an officer. He was an officer. And I'll never forget this. To carry him back to the cage, I put him on my Jeep in the front of the Jeep, and he was holding on to what we call the cow catcher, which is a strip of metal with a hook on it on top, that in case there were some wires across the world, the Germans would do that. This catcher would catch it and break the wire. But he was holding on to that, and I brought him back to the prisoners of war cage, and that was it.
Were you yourself a prisoner of war?
No.
Did you catch a lot of prisoners?
No, I wouldn't say that many, because I was in the headquarters company. Headquarters company had not so much combat as, if I was in the rifle company as a lieutenant, in the rifle company. Like in Normandy or in Hurtgen Forest, I wouldn't be here talking to you if I was a lieutenant in a rifle company. But they assigned me to the defense company for the platoon, for the company headquarters.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Oh yes. They wanted to give me a Bronze Star, and I refused it. I refused it because there was about 12 or 13 officers that graduated from infantry school, went to 8th Division. The only one that wasn't wounded or killed was me. I was the only one. And I told them I didn't do enough. And they took the Bronze Star back. And I also got a battlefield promotion in Hurtgen Forest.
Tell me a little bit about battle planning.
There was different things that were happening. Now, I don't know if you knew about Hurtgen Forest, or it was a tragedy to go in Hurtgen Forest, and we did that, and I blamed the generals that were in charge. In Bradley's book, there's only one paragraph about Hurtgen Forest. One. There were 33,000 casualties in Hurtgen Forest, and just one paragraph in Bradley's book. 33,000 casualties, something like 6,000 or 7,000 killed, and the rest were wounded. Now, that is the other part I wanted to express. We never should have gone into Hurtgen Forest. You try going through a forest, and the enemy is waiting to sit right there looking at you all the time. You don't see them, they see you. And they used to shoot first. They shoot first. And they have machine guns. They covered one machine gun, covers the other machine gun. If you knocked out this machine gun, you're under fire of this one. So you had very little, we had many casualties in Hurtgen Forest. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you something that people don't talk about too much. It was winter time. There was maybe about 6 or 8 inches of snow. Temperature was about 5 below zero. We relieved the 28th Division, which was really beaten up badly by the Germans. We relieved them, and I think it was something like late November or in the first part of December. And then the snows came, and we first went up there. It was so cold, we had 2 pair of pants, 2 of everything we wore. Never changed the pants till we got a shower. It was something like the end of March. Always had the same clothes on. The only thing you took off was your shoes. And you took your socks and you washed your socks, and in order that they would dry, you put them on your body. That's the only way you can dry them to some extent. The other part that you remembered in Hurtgen Forest is that the ground was frozen. You couldn't dig a hole. If you were fortunate to get a German hole, you were lucky. The thing was that some of the fellows in the rifle platoons did this. They would take the M1 and shoot a clip, a round hole, and then with the bayonet go in and dig out the hole. When they got it deep enough, they would put in a concussion grenade, concussion grenades would open up the soil. That, some of the fellows did that. It had to do that. If you didn't get it was a terrible, terrible thing, and I blame the generals for going in there. We didn't have to go in there. We could have gone around it. The German general who defended the area says you could have gone around it. We had the tanks, we had everybody available, and we lost a lot of people in there. A lot of people. And a couple of years ago I read where people were going through the hurricane forest and they found 2 dead Germans and 1 American. Just walking through the woods. They're still there. That was 2 years ago. The dense woods.
Where exactly is Hurricane Forest?
Where was Hurricane Forest?
Yes.
It was east of Rot and Rotkin, and southeast of Aachen. And it was before the Rohr River, not the R-U-H-R River, it's the R-O-E-R River, which was in front of the town of trying to think, Duren, D-U-R-E-N. And there was a big dam that supplied the water to Cologne, supplied the water to Duren, and our object was to capture that dam and lake, reservoir. The reason why we had to capture it was that the First Army, American Army, was here, and the British First Army was further up from the Rohr. And if we didn't capture that reservoir, they could have blown up the dam and all this water would come in and stop all our forces from crossing the Rohr River, because we'd be flooded. And that was a big, big problem. But you never read about that Rohr, about the Hurricane Forest, until we started talking about it. Hurricane Forest, the generals never wanted you to know what happened in there. If they did, it would have been a #1 like. We lost more men there than the Marines lost in Iwo Jima, but you never heard of Hurricane Forest. That is true. That is true. Never heard of Hurricane Forest. But we finally managed to get through it. Our division captured the town of Hurricane. And there were pillboxes there. In the woods they had them in the frontal of an elevation, and they covered the elevations of the frontage with different branches, and so you couldn't tell. And the only way that you could tell is when they fired. And then you were too late. You were all exposed. It was a bad, bad situation. Then they had me with my anti-tank guns. I had 3 of them, 57 millimeters. There was a pillbox that was holding up a whole regiment. And they had, the pillbox was like a cement mound, but it had slits in it, and so that they could shoot out. They wanted me to see if I could get my anti-tank guns to shoot into the slits to the thing. Well, the minute we got there, mortars come in, artillery came in, and there was a big hole in the roof that I was observing from, and the mortar rounds were hitting the top of the roof, and if one came through that big opening in the roof, I would never be here talking to you. So I dove down the cellar stairway. It wasn't a cellar, it was a second story stairway. And that's what part of my disability was come from. That one right there. And we never got to shoot into those slits. We never did. It was true. They had us cold. They had us cold. And the reason why, there was a spur of woods. They were reaching a road that goes into Herkin. And in that spur of woods, the Germans had a guy up in the tree with a phone. Anytime we got onto the road, there was mortars, artillery, and everything going on there. I saw a tank lieutenant who refused to move his tanks because he had most of the company's tanks were knocked out because they had us all zeroed in. I saw Colonel given direct orders, and he refused. He was arrested right away. He was arrested. He should have been. He should have been arrested. Because many guys were dying, and the only way we could get there is if we could get the tanks out. Well, anyway, it goes on further, and I'll never forget that there was a hill 101, and our 13th Infantry Regiment tried to take the hill. They had casualties, casualties, casualties. Finally, they pulled back, and then they decided, the generals decided to get a ranger company, the same ranger company that landed in Normandy on D-Day. Got them to help us. Well, they didn't want artillery fire to get the Germans, warn the Germans, so they attacked without the artillery fire. For 4 solid days, they kept trying to get to the top of that hill, which that hill covered, from the top of the hill you could see all the down below on the other side and the German area. They finally, after losing, I'm trying to remember, there was 700 men in that regiment, battalion, Ranger battalion. There were 700 men, and they lost something like almost 2/3, either killed or wounded. But they finally held there, and they waited for our 13th Infantry to come back and relieve them. that poor colonel, he was in trouble until we relieved them. They could have, if there was a counterattack, he would have been taken. So, but we got the 13th Infantry up there, and that was fortunate, because from then on, the Remagen Bridge came along, and Cologne was captured. A lot of crazy things. A lot of crazy things, but the heavy fighting was over. Herkin Force was the heavy fighting. After that, if you surrounded a German group, they would surrender. They would surrender. That's why I believe that Patton's way of fighting a war, that's what he would do. And he did that. And that's what helped a lot. When we went to Bonn, that's where the Remagen Bridge is. At Remagen Bridge, they had us set up a pontoon bridge also. Well, we crossed on the pontoon bridge. Now, everybody had to come over off the pontoon bridge, had to go through a tunnel, because it was a railroad bridge, and the trains would go through this tunnel. There was a hill there. They had to go through this tunnel, and we did that. And then in the Ruhr pocket, Rohr Pocket was created because some of our tank forces surrounded a group of Germans that were getting near Essen and Dusseldorf in that area. And they took our division, and we had to go right up through the middle, through the division, and we reached Essen and Dusseldorf. And then it was a lot easier from then on. A lot easier. Different things, different things happened. I'll never forget. In Hurricane Force was one thing I had to tell you. I was on the road, and here's the town of Hurricane, but I was on the left side of the road, the right side of the Hurricane, and the Germans had us in their view all the time. They were excellent soldiers. They had the camouflage, they had the right equipment. There was no shortage there. And I walked out on the road, and it was a dusting of snow on the road. I'll never forget this. And when the Germans saw me on that road, they fired mortars. Well, I ran a mortar squad for a while, and I know how long it takes when you see someone to get your mortar squad and set up to shoot. So when I stood there for a while, then I got out quick, because then I knew that they were going to fire, and they did. And this is one mortar round came when there was a dusting of snow, and my feet were on the snow. One mortar round came right between the two footprints. And I looked at him afterwards. Then I looked at that German down there. He was viewing me again, and I said, "That's it." I left him. I left there. But that's just some of the incidents that happened. Some.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
How did I what?
Stay in touch with your family back home.
Just by letters to my wife. That's it. And just, they had these V-mail things. And of course I had a censor mail to being an officer. I had a censor mail also. But I didn't care to do that. The fellows were good, and then we were all on the same team. So that's the way it worked.
And what was the food like?
Do you know what K rations are?
No, I do not.
K rations are in a box. I had a K ration here for a long time, and they have a little can, bacon or Spam or something. You got some crackers, and you got some cigarettes. And if you try to eat that for a long time, you are going to get tired of K rations, believe me. In Normandy, when we landed, we had 3 days supply of K rations. So, because in order to feed a company, men, you have to have a kitchen, and the kitchen's got to be producing food, and then they bring it to you. Well, in Hurricane Forest, where the temperature is 5 below zero, if they made something, by the time they got to us, it was nothing. So they stopped that, and all we had was K rations. The K rations, that's what we ate.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
Plenty of ammunition, yes. And in the anti-tank guns, the French had a shell that was better than our gun, for us. They had a shell called a Sabot, S-A-B-O-T shell. It had a very, very hard metal center, maybe 1.5 inches, and around it was a soft metal, And what would happen if you shoot that at a tank, the soft metal would get around the small metal, and the small metal would puncture a hole in the tank. It was the small metal that did it, and that was called a sabot. And they used that, I guess, in the I know that the pilot of the A-20s that they had here at Bradley Field, they had sabot ammunition in their planes to shoot at tanks.
Did you feel pressure or stress throughout the entire experience, or did it just become routine?
There's nothing routine about being up where somebody can kill you 24 hours a day. It's not routine. It's not routine. I was fortunate, like I said before, I was in a headquarters company. If I was in a rifle company, you would have another person to talk to, not me.
Was there something special you did for good luck? Like, did you have a good luck charm, or did you have a...
I always put my left shoe on first. Always. And the left sock. That had to go on first. Never changed.
Never changed.
I figured that was my lucky charm.
How did people entertain themselves?
There was no entertainment. There was no entertainment till towards the end of when we crossed the Roar River. Then the captain told me that, incidentally, in Hurricane Forest, I got my battlefield promotion there. But the captain told me, "You've got to go on leave." I says, "I don't want to go on leave. Well, why do I want to go on leave?" He says, "We have to submit so many men on leave. And I picked you because you haven't gone anywhere." And so I had to get in a train in France that went all the way around to the Riviera. And believe me, it was worth it. It was worth it. Because we were in the Miramar Hotel on the Riviera. And dinner, you had to get dressed up. And they had violins playing for our dinner. Violins, the French had the violins playing. Well, for 5 days, I ate and slept very well. And it was good. Then I went all the way back.
Were there any entertainers?
Oh, we had USO. I'll never forget. Near Bonn somewhere. Lily, fellow by the name of Lily Pons was a singer, opera singer, and her husband was Castellanos. And we got an invitation to go to the USO. They were going to put on a show for us. Well, next to this building where they put the show on was our artillery battery. And when the show was going on and Lily Pons was singing, the artillery started firing. Poor Lily Pons, I feel sorry for her and her husband, but they managed to go through because the musicians were ready to stop, and we were far from the front lines. We were far as when the artillery shooting, they're 4 miles back or something like that.
Did you travel anywhere else while you were in the service besides the Riviera, or was that?
No, that was it. We went all the way to the Elbe River as a unit. At the Elbe River, the Germans were on one side and we were on this side. And the British came and had boats for us. And the boats would carry the men over the Elbe River, but there was nothing, there was nothing like combat or anything like that. They did plant some bombs. When we crossed the Elbe River, they in turn, in a dirt road, they would set these bombs. And they would set the bombs that would go off after like 3 or 4 metal objects went over this bomb. And it blew up one of the things. But the same thing happened in Normandy. I'll never forget that. I went to look for a place for put the headquarters, and it was in Normandy, and then there was a small road, a church here, small road, and a fence here. So you had to go through this into this road. And in it was an apple orchard right in here. And the Germans, that's where Germans were using their field artillery to shooting us. Well, I went in with my Jeep to that apple orchard, came out with my Jeep, and the kitchen truck started to go in and went in, and when the kitchen truck come out empty, got blown up.
Wow.
They set that mine so it would go off after 4 metal objects passed over there. So I was pretty lucky in that one. A good thing I wasn't number 4.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events? Like something
Yes.
that was really
Yes.
funny?
I can tell you. After we crossed into Germany, past the Rohr River, I had my anti-tank guns in back of a battalion of the 101st Infantry Division. And we went, this battalion of the 101st went down this small dirt road, and I was behind them. And they came to a concentration camp, a small concentration camp. And they said they couldn't stop, so I had stopped. And in there were 2 pits about maybe 7, 8 yards wide, maybe about 35 yards long. They were all filled with dead people. I had pictures of it one time, and I don't know what I did with them, but that camp was in what we call WWII. It was on History Channel also. But my platoon was the first one there to go into the camp. When I got into camp and I saw the big ditches, all dead bodies and all, but in this brick house with a dirt floor, there was a row of guys sitting down along the wall on the sides, the back, and this side. And this was as far as this one. They were all sitting down. And they were all there with their eyes open. And I said to them, I said hi to one guy. No answer. I said again, no answer. So then I moved him, and he fell over. They were all dead. Every one of them was dead. There was one man who was on his bunk. They had 2 levels of, 2 levels of bunks, I think. Two levels, yeah. And he was up on his bunk. And he was lying there, And we always carried something for food. We had this chocolate. When you didn't have anything to eat, you had this chocolate. So I broke off a piece of chocolate and I gave it to him. And he smiled. Here's the guy that smiled and started chewing his chocolate. By the time I walked around that building inside, which was maybe 25 feet by 30 by 25 or whatever, I came back to him again, he was dead. I could see the chocolate on his lip. Could see the chocolate on his lip. Then my sergeant came over to me. Next to that concentration camp was a camp for Polish women who worked the fields for for vegetables and whatever they were doing. My sergeant came to me and he says, the women want that big Nazi flag that they got over their camp. I says, no, why would you want a big Nazi flag? You know what he said? They told them they want to make braziers. I thought that was humorous. They wanted to make braziers and they're going to use the big Nazi flag to do it. Well, that was just some of the things that happened.
And what were some of the pranks that you or others would pull on the soldiers, or soldiers that would
What?
pranks? What type of pranks? Like
Pranks?
jokes? Yes, jokes.
Oh no,
No jokes?
no jokes. No, it was too serious. I got along good with my men because I was fair with them. And if there was a troublemaker, he was not a troublemaker long.
And do you have any photographs with you?
I had the photograph of a Tiger tank with one of my platoons on it, and I destroyed it. I had all the maps of Hurtgen Forest. I destroyed those. Why? Second thinking, I would never do it again, but unfortunately they're gone. But this Tiger tank was in Rott, Germany. It was just before we were going to Hurtgen Forest. And that Tiger tank was huge, really huge. We didn't knock it out. The tankers knocked it out. And what they did, the Tiger tank was in back of a building, and he would come out, swing his guns over, and fire at our tanks. Well, he did that once too much, and our tankers hit his thread. They have a thread on that makes it go. When they hit the thread, the Tiger tank couldn't move. So that they had to leave it there. But our tankers did the job. And in the field, just before that house, there was a German Panzer tank. It was, I think, the 4, they call it. Our tankers had fired at that guy and never penetrated the tank. It would gouge the front, 4 or 5 gouges out of the front of the tank, because they were like this, with a V. And when you hit this, the shell would go over. And that was beginning of Hurtgen Forest.
What did you think of officers or fellow soldiers or fellow officers?
The National Guard officers were terrible that we had when we first went in service. They were not good at all. Captain Rankin was good. He was the only one. He had guts. The others, no. When the 8th Division, they were all good. If they weren't good, they were relieved. We had a general relieved. We had 2 generals relieved. because if you didn't perform, you were gone.
And how about soldiers?
I didn't have much trouble in my platoon because I had it all good men. I gave an order, they did it. I'll never forget, in Hershkin Forest, I had to do some patrolling around the headquarters. One day, we saw this German out there in the woods. And my scout went out there, and there was a huge Christmas tree. And I could see that he didn't have a weapon, the German didn't have a weapon. And he would go around the tree, and our guy was right behind him with a rifle. They went around twice, and I said, that's the end of this. I took my gun and I fired it, and the German put his hands up, and he come over. That German in Hershkin Forest was an engineer. He was living off the food of dead Americans, because we always carried extra food. He lived off of that. He was interrogated, and that report made the Division Intelligence Report in Hershkin Forest. He lived off our food. And at that same spot, we were on a knoll. I had a 50 caliber machine gun on a knoll. And I had my best gunner on it. And this enemy hope the story about the braziers are in there.
Yes. Did you keep a personal diary?
No,
No.
no, you couldn't carry anything. You see, you had every now and then you got fired at, you had to drop down. You couldn't carry things with you. So you're limited.
No one really carried a personal diary? Not many
No,
people?
no.
Do you, now this is coming to the end of the service. Do you recall the day your service ended?
When the fighting ended, when the division ended, or when I was discharged?
Actually, all three. I mean, do you remember the day the fighting ended and
Oh yes, yes. Well, it was the last few weeks was really not any fighting. It was just a matter of capturing Germans. I went down the road with my anti-tank gun one time, and I had a Corporal Drexler. Corporal Drexler could speak German very well. And out on the road were these two Germans with white flags. And we stopped, and I said to Drexler, I asked them what they want. They told me that in the woods there was a whole regiment that wanted to surrender. And so I left Drexler there. I told them to leave all their weapons in the woods, come on out and march down the road. You just walk right into our unit. If you didn't have a weapon, you were fine. And as a matter of fact, they all had pistols. All had pistols. And in one area where we had a bunch of people coming in, I had them throw the pistols onto this trailer that we used to hook behind a Jeep. The trailer was full of pistols. They all had a pistol. And there, it was interesting, and then they had very little motorized vehicles. It was usually a lot of horse and wagons pulling the things. A lot.
at the end of the war?
Yeah. And it was thanks to our Air Force and everybody else that got involved, but you could see why the Russians, and I met the Russians there too, because we went all the way to Schwerin in Germany. There's a lake there, Schwerin Lake, and there was a small brook. The Russians were on one side of the brook and we were on the other. One day I decided to go and talk to the Russians. Well, when I got there, they didn't look like much, but they must have been very good fighters. They had to be. And no smiles, no nothing. They called the lieutenant over. I gave him a cigarette, and I asked him if he spoke German. I asked him if he spoke Italian. I asked him if he spoke French. Nothing. I didn't speak Polish or Russian, so we didn't have a conversation. I gave him the rest of the pack of cigarettes, and I got in and left him. But the point was, in Schwerin, there was no one there. I had my driver drive my Jeep up to the steps of this railroad, the railroad housing, and we went on a platform. On the tracks was a whole German group of people in different cars. They were all wounded Germans. They were in there in about maybe 4 or 5 cars, and the engine was running. They were gonna, and one of the Germans that spoke English come over to me, and I asked him, "Where are you going?" He says, "Well, we're gonna go up to, I think, Lubeck or something like that, and then we're gonna." I told him, they were harmless to me and to my men, so I says, "Be careful, just be careful." And they did go, because we were right by the Baltic Sea. We went we went as far as the Baltic Sea. Now that is just, couldn't go any further north. And the train went into Lubeck, and I told the officer that spoke to me on that platform, "Get your train west of the Elbe River," because I knew the Elbe River was going to be our dividing line. And he thanked me for it. Well, they weren't fighting. They were just a bunch of wounded men, and there's nothing worse than trying to get well from a serious wound.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward that?
With what?
What did you do in the days and weeks after the war was over?
Well, the war was over in Europe.
But then,
And they got us all together, and we went to France. They had us all set to go home, and from there, we were going to go to Seattle, Washington, and be a follow-up division to the invasion of Japan. I had something like 145 points, but they still wanted me to go there. As a matter of fact, when I left the service, there were 2 colonels wanted me to stay, because evidently, I don't know, I never seen the report, but evidently I must have had a good report all the time, otherwise they wouldn't ask me.
and do you know of many men that actually went from the European theater, and when it was over in May, that went to the Japanese theater?
No.
No.
Our division didn't go. We come back to Missouri, and we all got discharged. And they asked me again at that time to stay in. They wanted me to stay. I decided my family was more important.
Did you work or go back to school when you came home?
That was a good question. That's a good question. I could have, because we had no place to live. My wife just had a baby, and we needed money. The other thing, you had to go to work. Find a job and go to work. And that's what I did. But I had all these chances to go to school. We had, at that time, they call a 5220. Do you know what a 5220 is?
Is that part of the GI Bill?
Yeah. You get $20 a week for 52 weeks. And I didn't even apply for that because I got a job right away. I couldn't see getting $20 when I could probably get more by working. And that's the way it went.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Oh yes, yes. But they're all dead now. They all died before me. They're from Boston. The company commander was from California. As a matter of fact, he stopped after the war and visited with me with our first sergeant, not first sergeant, a couple of sergeants he had with him, and they just toured the country. And we played golf one day. after the war, of course, at the Canton Golf Course. It was fun to see them. Never saw them again, but we corresponded with each other, and all of them are no longer here.
And did you join a veterans organization?
Oh yes, the Veterans of Foreign Wars was started in Avon by 2 World War I vets, and we all got together. They were the instrumental in making it, and I was the first commander of the post. They made me they voted for me as the first commander. I tried to do the best job I could, arrange all the parades and stuff like that.
And what did you go on to do as a career after the war?
Insurance. I became an insurance agent.
And did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Absolutely. In my opinion, the war in Afghanistan could have been taken care of. I think they did the right thing there. But they didn't do the right thing in Iraq. By no means. No one should decide to start a war unless he's been in a battle or in a war or his children been in a war. And then he gets the real story. General Sherman in the Civil War said, war is hell. Believe me when I tell you war is hell. And in combat, the sound, explosions, it's just the worst things there are.
If in a veterans organization, in your veterans organization, what kinds of activities does your post or association have?
Well, we started with we needed money. So we started like in the center of town. We had I don't know, where you get the kids to have all these instruments where they ride, and like a fair of some kind. We tried to get money that way to help the post. It helped a little bit, but that would eventually, I did it so many years, and then I let somebody else take over.
And do you still attend reunions?
Did I what?
Attend reunions, or?
Oh, I went to the last division reunion was maybe 12 years ago. It was in Virginia. Trying to think of the place in Virginia. My son had a business, and he also had an airplane. And he got me in the plane one day. We flew to Lynchburg. I'm trying to think. Lynchburg. We flew all the way down there. And what he would do is when we get up in the air, he would let me take the controls. Oh, I thought that was the best thing I ever did in my life. I'm watching the compass. He says, stay on that compass reading. And oh boy, that was fun.
Now, how did your service and experiences affect your life?
I think discipline. Discipline. Every person has to have discipline. Why do you get up at so much time in the morning? Why do you go to work? Why do you stop at lights? Discipline. You are supposed to do things that are right. And to me that would help, because if I had to be in the service at 5 o'clock in the morning at a certain spot, I was there. I was there.
Now I have a question. On the flip side, well, how do you feel towards the German soldiers?
Towards the Germans. I don't know if I should tell you this story, but they were good and they were not so good. The bad ones were the SS troops. The SS, especially during the Battle of the Bulge, our prisoners, I know they shot a bunch of them. I know that. Well, I'll tell you a little story on that one too. This Belgian family, the SS troops came and they killed everyone in the family except this young boy. He was a young man. Everyone but him. And my daughter's right at the door.
How you doing?
Just take, no, don't move anything. Don't move anything, just take what she's got. And this Belgian was, he hated the SS troops so much because there was an SS division that killed his family. And the 13th Infantry, one of our regiments, put an American uniform on him. Because he was very noticeable in the division. He got his food from us, and they gave him a uniform. All the SS prisoners went to him. All went to him. Yeah, I didn't see any of that, but this is what the scuttlebutt was.
And final question. Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I can't think of anything more. I'm a big mouth, and I probably gave you more than I should. I don't know.
All right. Thank you very much. And if you could just repeat your
Okay.
name. If you could just repeat your name.
Arthur C. Neriani.
All